A Defense of Cosmetics by Max Beerbohm. Nay, but it is useless to protest. Artifice must queen it once more in the town, and so, if there be any whose hearts chafe at her return, let them not say, "We have come into evil times," and be all for resistance, reformation, or angry cavilling. For did the king's scepter send the sea retrograde, or the wand of the sorcerer avail to turn the sun from its old course? And what man, or what number of men, ever stayed that inexorable process by which the cities of this world grow and are very strong, fail, and grow again? Indeed, there is charm in every period, and only fools and flutterpates do not seek reverently for what is charming in their own day. No martyrdom, however fine, nor satire, however splendidly bitter, has changed by a little tittle the known tendency of things. It is the times that can perfect us, not we the times. And so let all of us wisely acquiesce. Like the little wired marionettes, let us acquiesce to the dance. For behold, the Victorian era comes to its end, and the day of Sanctus Simplicitus is quite ended. The old signs are here, and the portents to warn the seer of life that we are ripe for a new epoch of artifice. Are not men rattling the dice box and ladies dipping their fingers in the rouge pot? At Rome, in the keenest time of her Doringolade, when there was gambling even in the holy temples, great ladies, does not Lucian tell us, did not scruple to squander all they had upon unguents from Arabia. Nero's mistress and unhappy wife, Porpea, of shameful memory, had in her traveling retinue 15, or as some say 50, she-asses, for the sake of their milk, that was thought an incomparable guard against cosmetics with poison in them. Last century, too, when life was lived by candlelight, and ethics was but etiquette, and even art a question of punctilio, women, we know, gave the best hours of the day to the crafty farting of their faces and the towering of their coiffures, and men, throwing passion into the wine-bowl to sink or swim, turned out thought to browse upon the green cloth. Cannot we even now in our fancy see them, those silent exquisites round the long table at Brooks, masked, all of them, lest the countenance should betray feeling, in quince masks, through whose eyelets they sat peeping, while Macao brought them riches or ruin. We can see them, those silent rascals, sitting there with their cards and their rouleaux and their wooden money bowls, long after the dawn had crept up St. James's and pressed its haggard face against the window of the little club. Yes, we can raise their ghosts, and more, we can see many wear a devotion to hazard fully as meek as theirs. In England there has been a wonderful revival of cards. Baccarat may rival dead Pharaoh in the tale of her devotees. We have all seen the sweet English chatelaine at her roulette wheel, and ere long it may be that tender parents will be writing to complain of the compulsory baccarat in our public schools. In fact, we are all gamblers once more, but our gambling is on a finer scale than ever it was. We fly from the card-room to the heath, and from the heath to the city, and from the city to the coast of the Mediterranean. And just as no one seriously encourages the clergy in its frantic efforts to lay the spirit of chance that has thus resurged among us, so no longer are many faces set against that other great sign of a more complicated life, the love for cosmetics. No longer is a lady of fashion blamed if, to escape the outrageous persecution of time, she fly for sanctuary to the toilet table, and if a damosel, prying in her mirror, be sure that with brush and pigment she can trick herself into more charm, we are not angry. Indeed, why should we ever have been? Surely it is laudable, this wish to make fair the ugly and overtop fairness. And no wonder that within the last 5 years the trade of the makers of cosmetics has increased immoderately, 20-fold, so one of these makers has said to me, "We need but walk down any modish street and peer into the little broughams that flit past, or, in Thackeray's phrase, under the bonnet of any woman we meet, to see over how wide a kingdom rouge reigns." And now that the use of pigments is becoming general, and most women are not so young as they are painted, it may be asked curiously how the prejudice ever came into being. Indeed, it is hard to trace folly, for that it is inconsequent, to its start, and perhaps it savors too much of reason to suggest that the prejudice was due to the tristful confusion man has made of soul and surface. Through trusting so keenly to the detection of one by keeping watch upon the other, and by force of the 1,000 errors following, he has come to think of surface even as the reverse of soul. He seems to suppose that every clown beneath his paint and lip salve is moribund and knows it, though in verity, I am told, clowns are as cheerful a class of men as any other. That the fairer the fruit's rind and the more delectable its bloom, the closer are packed the ashes within it. The very jargon of the hunting field connects cunning with a mask, and so perhaps came man's anger at the embellishment of woman, that lovely mask of enamel with its shadows of pink and tiny penciled veins. What must lurk behind it? Of what treacherous mysteries may it not be the screen? Does not the heathen lacquer her dark face, and the harlot paint her cheeks, because sorrow has made them pale? After all, the old prejudice is a-dying. We need not pry into the secret of its birth. Rather is this a time of jolliness and glad indulgence, for the era of rouge is upon us, and as only in an elaborate era can man, by the tangled accrescency of his own pleasures and emotions, reach that refinement which is his highest excellence, and by making himself, so to say, independent of nature, come nearest to God, so only in an elaborate era is woman perfect. Artifice is the strength of the world, and in that same mask of paint and powder, shadowed with vermeil tinct and most trimly penciled, is woman's strength. For see, we need not look so far back to see woman under the direct influence of nature. Early in this century, our grandmothers, sickening of the odor of faded exotics and spilt wine, came out into the daylight once more, and let the breezes blow around their faces and enter, sharp and welcome, into their lungs. Artifice they drove forth, and they set Martin Tupper upon a throne of mahogany to rule over them. A very reign of terror set in. All things were sacrificed to the fetish nature. Old ladies may still be heard to tell how, when they were girls, affectation was not, and if we verify their assertion in the light of such literary authorities as Dickens, we find that it is absolutely true. Women appear to have been in those days utterly natural in their conduct, flighty, fainting, blushing, gushing, giggling, and shaking their curls. They knew no reserve in the first days of the Victorian era. No thought was held too trivial, no emotion too silly to express. To nature everything was sacrificed. Great heavens! And in those barren days what influence did women exert? By men they seemed not to have been feared nor loved, but regarded rather as dear little creatures or wonderful little beings, and in their relation to life as foolish and ineffectual as the landscapes they did in watercolor. Yet, if the women of those years were of no great account, they had a certain charm, and they at least had not begun to trespass upon men's ground. If they touched not thought, which is theirs by right, at any rate they refrained from action, which is ours. Far more serious was it when, in the natural trend of time, they became enamored of rinking and archery and galloping along the Brighton parade. Swiftly they have sped on since then from horror to horror. The invasion of the tennis courts and of the golf links, the seizure of the bicycle and of the typewriter, were but steps preliminary in that campaign which is to end with the final victorious occupation of St. Stephen's. But stay, the horrific pioneers of womanhood who gad hither and thither and, confounding wisdom with the device on her shield, shriek for the unbecoming, are doomed. Though they spin their bicycle treadles so amazingly fast, they are too late. Though they scream victory, none follow them. Artifice, that fair exile, has returned. Yes, though the pioneers know it not, they are doomed already, for of the curiosities of history, not the least strange is the manner in which two social movements may be seen to overlap, long after the second has, in truth, given its death blow to the first, and, in like manner, as one has seen the limbs of a murdered thing in lively movement, so we need not doubt that, though the voices of those who cry out for reform be very terribly shrill, they will soon be hushed. Dear Artifice is with us. It needed but that we should wait. Surely, without any of my pleading, women will welcome their great and amiable protectrix as by instinct, for, have I not said, it is upon her that all their strength, their life almost, depends. Artifice's first command to them is that they should repose. With bodily activity their powder will fly, their enamel crack. They are butterflies who must not flit if they love their bloom. Now, setting aside the point of view of passion, from which very many obvious things might be said, and probably have been by the minor poets, it is, from the intellectual point of view, quite necessary that a woman should repose. Hers is the resupinate sex. On her couch she is a goddess, But so soon as ever she put her foot to the ground, lo, she is the veriest little silly pop, and quite done for. She cannot rival us in action, but she is our mistress in the things of the mind. Let her not by second-rate athletics, nor indeed by any exercise soever over the limbs, spoil the pretty procedure of her reason. Let her be content to remain the guide, the subtle suggester of what we must do, the strategist whose soldiers we are, the little architect whose workmen. After all, as a pretty girl once said to me, women are a sex by themselves, so to speak, and the sharper the line between their worldly functions and ours, the better. This greater swiftness and less erring subtlety of mind, their forte and privilege, justifies the painted mask that artifice bids them wear. Behind it their minds can play without let, they gain the strength of reserve. They become important, as in the days of the Roman Empire were the emperor's mistresses, as was the Pompadour at Versailles, as was our Elizabeth. Yet do not their faces become lined with thought, beautiful and without meaning are their faces. And truly, of all the good things that will happen with the full revival of cosmetics, one of the best is that surface will finally be severed from soul. That damnable confusion will be solved by the extinguishing of a prejudice which, as I suggest, itself created. Too long has the face been degraded from its rank as a thing of beauty to a mere vulgar index of character or emotion. We had come to troubling ourselves, not with its charm of color and line, but with such questions as whether the lips were sensuous, the eyes full of sadness, the nose indicative of determination. I have no quarrel with physiognomy. For my own part, I believe in it, but it has tended to degrade the face aesthetically, in such wise as the study of cheirosophy has tended to degrade the hand. And the use of cosmetics, the masking of the face, will change this. We shall gaze at a woman merely because she is beautiful, not stare into her face anxiously, as into the face of a barometer. How fatal it has been, in how many ways, this confusion of soul and service. Wise were the Greeks in making plain masks for their mummers to play in, and dunces we not to have done the same. Only the other day, an actress was saying that what she was most proud of in her art, next of course to having appeared in some provincial pantomime at the age of 3, was the deftness with which she contrived, in parts demanding a rapid succession of emotions, to dab her cheeks quite quickly with rouge from the palm of her right hand, or powder from the palm of her left. Gracious goodness! Why do not we have masks upon the stage? Drama is the presentment of the soul in action. The mirror of the soul is the voice. Let the young critics, who seek a cheap reputation for austerity, by cavilling at incidental music, set their faces rather against the attempt to justify inferior dramatic art by the subvention of a quite alien art like painting, of any art, indeed, whose sphere is only surface. Let those again who sneer, so rightly, at the painted anecdotes of the Academy, censure equally the writers who trespass on painters' ground. It is a proclaimed sin that a painter should concern himself with a good little girl's affection for a Scotch greyhound, or the keen enjoyment of their port by elderly gentlemen of the early 40s. Yet, for a painter to prod the soul with his paintbrush is no worse than for a novelist to refuse to dip under the surface, in the fashion of avoiding a psychological study of grief by stating that the owner's hair turned white in a single night, or of shame by mentioning a sudden rush of scarlet to the cheeks, is as lamentable as may be. But, with the universal use of cosmetics, and the consequent discernment of soul and surface, upon which at the risk of irritating a reader, I must again insist, all those old properties that went to bolster up the ordinary novel, the trembling lips, the flashing eyes, the determined curve of the chin, the nervous trick of biting the mustache, aye, and the hectic spot of red on either cheek, will be made spifflicate, as the puppets were spifflicated by Don Quixote. Yes, even now Demos begins to discern. The same spirit that has revived Rouge smote his mouth as it grinned at the wondrous painter of mist and river, and now sends him sprawling for the pearls that Meredith dived for in the deep waters of romance. Indeed, the revival of cosmetics must needs be so splendid an influence, conjuring boons innumerable, that one inclines almost to mutter against that inexorable law by which artifice must perish from time to time. That such branches of painting as the staining of glass or the illuminating of manuscripts should fall into disuse seems, in comparison, so likely. These were esoteric arts. They died with the monastic spirit. But personal appearance is art's very basis. The painting of the face is the first kind of painting men can have known. To make beautiful things, is it not an impulse laid upon few? But to make oneself beautiful is an universal instinct. Strange that the resultant art could ever perish. So fascinating an art, too. So various in its materials from stimus, cynthium, and fligo to bismuth and arsenic. So simple in that its ground and its subject matter are one. So marvelous in that its very subject matter becomes lovely when an artist has selected it. For surely this is no idle nor fantastic saying. To deny that making up is an art, on the pretext that the finished work of its exponents depends for beauty and excellence upon the ground chosen for the work, is absurd. At the touch of a true artist, the plainest face turns comely. As subject matter, the face is no more than suggestive, as ground, merely a loom round which the beauteous artifacts may spin the threads of any golden fabric. Que nuns nomen habent operosi signa maronis, pondus inners quondam durac massa fut, multa viros nascard desat, pars maxima rerum, oftendat, si non interiora tegas. And, as Ovid would seem to suggest, by pigments any tone may be set aglow on a woman's cheek, from enamel the features take any form, insomuch that surely the advocates of soup kitchens and free libraries, and other devices for giving people what Providence did not mean them to receive, should send out pamphlets in the praise of self-embellishment, for it will place beauty within easy reach of many who could not otherwise hope to attain to it. But of course artifice is rather exacting. In return for the repose she forces, so wisely, upon her followers, when the sun is high or the moon is blown across heaven, she demands that they should pay her long homage at the sun's rising. The initiate may not enter lightly upon her mysteries, for if a bad complexion be inexcusable, to be ill-painted is unforgivable, and when the toilet is laden once more with the fullness of its elaboration, we shall hear no more of the proper occupation for women. And think how sweet an energy to sit at the mirror of coquetry. See the dear merits of the toilet as shown upon old vases, or upon the walls of Roman ruins, or rather still, read Baudiger's alluring scholarly description of Morgenskennen im Potsdamer einer reichen Römerin. Read of Sabina's face as she comes through the curtain of her bedchamber to the chamber of her toilet. The slave girls have long been chafing their white feet upon the marble floor. They stand, those timid Greek girls, marshaled in little battalions. Each has her appointed task, and all kneel in welcome as Sabina stalks, ugly and frowning, to the toilet chair. Scaphion steps forth from among them, and dipping a tiny sponge in a bowl of hot milk, passes it lightly, ever so lightly, over her mistress's face. The Pompeian pastes melt beneath it like snow. A cooling lotion is poured over her brow, and is fanned with feathers. Phael comes after, a clever girl, captured in some sea skirmish on the Aegean. In her left hand she holds the ivory box, wherein are the fucus and that white powder, simithium. In her right a sheaf of slim brushes. With how sure a touch does she mingle the colors, and in what sweet proportion blushes and blanches her lady's upturned face. Phael is the cleverest of all the slaves. Now Calamus dips her quill in a certain powder that floats, liquid and sable, in the hollow of her palm. Standing upon tiptoe and with lips parted, she traces the arch of the eyebrows. The slaves whisper loudly of their lady's beauty, and two of them hold up a mirror to her. Yes, the eyebrows are rightly arched. But why does Pasicas abase herself? She is craving leave to powder Sabina's hair with a fine new powder. It is made of the grated rind of the cedar tree, and a Gallic perfumer, whose stall is near the circus, gave it to her for a kiss. No lady in Rome knows of it. And so, when 4 special slaves have piled up the headdress, out of a perforated box this glistening powder is showered. Into every little brown ringlet it enters, till Sabina's hair seems like a pile of gold coins. Lest the breezes send it flying, the girls lay the powder with sprinkled attar. Soon Sabina will start for the temple of Cybele.